Hello and welcome to Talking Law, the podcast where you can hear barristers, judges, solicitors, managing partners and more talk about their careers and lives in law. I'm Sally Penni MBE. I'm a barrister at Kenworthy's Chambers in Manchester, the Joint Vice Chair of the Association of Women Barristers and the founder of Women in the Law UK. This episode is supported by Cbre, a leading global provider of commercial real estate services and investments. Find out more at cbre.com. Before you meet today's guest, a reminder, the tickets for the Women in the Law UK annual dinner and conference this November 2022 are on sale now. Please visit womeninthelaw.uk.com for details. I'd also love you to watch my recent TED Talk. Please head to ted.com from the 8th of July and search for Sally Penni. Today I'm talking law with Banke Odunaike, Executive Director and Head of EMEA Legal at Cbre. Banke has also been recognised as one of the UK's 21 Women Who Will for driving innovation in diversity and inclusion, according to the Obelisk report, which was in partnership with the Next 100 Years project. I started by asking Banke to give me a bit of background about Cbre, what the organisation does and her role within it.
I head up Cbre's EMEA legal team for the Cbre's advisory business. I am based in London and I look after our operations across 27 countries with the support of a team of 57 phenomenal lawyers. I am a wife, I am a very proud mum of two, and I recently, well, it's not recent because he's now 17 months old, but I became a dog owner during lockdown. Wow. I've got a Jackapoo who's a total rascal, I tell you. But he is such a fantastic addition to our family. I can't believe we went so long without having a dog. They'll tell you a bit about Cbre.
Yeah.
Cbre is the leading global provider of commercial real estate services and investments. So you'll find us in over 100 countries, providing a multifarious range of real estate services, right from valuations through to brokerage and ESG consulting. But we're not just about the brick and mortar. You know, for anyone who's looking from the outside into the organization, Sally, I can, confidently say that right at the heart of our organization is our corporate responsibility, right? And the rationale for that, or the way that we ensure that that stays front and center of our operations, is we've got our what we call the RISE values, which is basically sort of written into the DNA of how we operate as an organization. And RISE stands for respect, integrity, service, and excellence. And so if you take respect, for instance, respect is not just respecting yourself, it's respecting your colleagues, respecting your clients, respecting the community, respecting the world in which we live in, giving back to the world. And then there's integrity. If you spoke to my kids, they tell you, Mom always says, you've got to do the right thing even when no one's watching, because that's the way I define integrity to them. And that's pretty much at the epicenter of our operations as a business. And then there's service. It's all about being the servant leader. You're a leader, and you've got to, take stock of what it is that the people around you, the community around you needs, and your employees, your workforce, what is it that they need, and really putting your all into doing the best that you can in providing the service that you have obviously been retained to provide. And then that leads on to excellence, and excellence being, as I just said now, what's the point of doing a job if you're not going to do it well? So it's at the heart of our day-to-day operations is ensuring that we really are, front runners, and that we are constantly looking at innovative ways to do better. We're constantly looking at how we can train up our workforce to be the best that they can be. So that, in a nutshell, is me and is a bit about Cbre.
Well, it's really fascinating because, as I'm interviewing you here, seeing your, the executive head of legal, the executive director, head of legal at Cbre, hugely successful. But I wonder if we can talk about your career journey and a little bit of how you got to where you are, really. Because I noticed in my research that you started life at Gottschalks, which is
Goschalks,
which
yes.
is a firm in
In
Hull.
Hull, yes.
And a friend of mine, Nikki Patterson, would say it's Goschalks in the kind of Yorkshire accent. So I'm not sure I'm saying it correctly. But how did life start there? So, for instance,
Yes.
how did you get your training contract? Was it easy? How did you start in Goschalks in Hull?
It's been quite a journey, Sally,
Yes.
and I got to tell you, I don't feel like I've quite got to my destination yet. In fact, I feel like I'm still very much at the beginning of my journey. But securing the training contract was not easy. Okay, now
Why?
I think it's generally not easy for anyone, because I just feel like I got a plethora of reject letters. And when I was applying for my training contract, of course, you start applying when you're in your second year of university.
Yes.
I had thought, well, I want to apply to city firms because, of course, you read, you hear, all about the sort of the Rolls Royce training that you get in the city, etc., comparative to within the region. But I also didn't want to place all my eggs in one basket. So I was looking at the city. Yes, my focus was predominantly on the city, but I was also looking regionally. For me, it was an element of, I couldn't quite see, when you hear about the glass ceiling and why you're getting the rejects, I couldn't quite see why. For me, it was a brick wall. I had good grades. I had a good CV. I had done all the training that was required for interviewing, etc. But I just wasn't getting past that initial application stage. And the one time that I got an inkling as to why I was obviously up against such an uphill struggle was at a time when I was, applying to a city firm with one of my friends who is an American white guy.
Yeah.
And he and I both required a work permit at the time, despite the fact that I had lived in the UK many years, studied in the UK. At the time that my training contract would have started, I would have required a work permit. So he was in the same boat, so were my Australian friends at university. Anyway, we'd both applied, and typically as a student, what you do, you sort of review each other's forms, making sure you put the best foot forward and everything's looking shipshape for the application. And of course, we submitted, and he got a letter inviting him for an interview. I waited a couple of weeks later, and I got a letter that was actually one of the most detailed reject letters I had received. And it basically said, really great application, great CV, very impressive. However, we cannot progress your application because you require a work permit. And we would have to prove that there are no UK or EEA students who were suitable for the role. And I thought, okay, well, that's fair enough. But hang on a second, you would have thought that this firm would have actually just stopped to think, well, let's just look at where we're getting the applications from.
Yes.
The same university, white guy, he's American, and he gets invited for interview. And actually, he went on to get a training contract, and they did get him a work permit. Now, the thing is, in that instant, when I got my letter, of course, I was distraught.
Yeah.
And we were sort of thinking, well, do you write to the firm, or do you ring them up and say, this is unfair? I know someone who has managed to secure an interview despite requiring a work permit like myself. But you just don't do that. This is my pal. The thing is, if he slipped through the net undetected, I was like, you go and run.
Yes.
You go and run. You do the best you can and go and be successful, right? So there was no challenging it at that stage. It was more a reality for me, Sally, that okay, there's an element of unfairness here. And that was the only time. I tend not to play the race card, but that was the one time I thought, okay, this is a little blatant now.
Yes.
But hey, I cried, I wiped my tears, and I marched straight to WH Smith to get some more embossed paper to print out my CV. You dust yourself off and you just keep going. And that's what I did. And what I did as well at that stage was I just re-strategized, and I thought, look, okay, there's been a lot of focus now on the city. Perhaps not. Perhaps let me look at the regional law firms. But at the same time, I didn't want to apply to just any odd outfit that called itself a law firm, because I knew the quality of training that I wanted.
Yes.
And I didn't want my CV scattered about, and through that, your brand gets diminished. So I focused again on, what are the top caliber law firms? And of course, Goschalks, I went to university in Hull, and Goschalks is an outstanding till this day law firm in Hull. And I had applied for their vacation scheme. I got selected for that. When you have that kind of opportunity, you make the most of it. You leave a lasting, and you hope that you leave a good impression with the people that you meet. And of course, then I went on to apply for the training contract, and I got my letter. I got my letter offering me a training contract eventually. I mean, it was shock. I mean, I got that when I opened the letter. But actually, I've got to tell you this before I tell you about opening the letter from Goschalks. So I got so many reject letters that a member of my family, one of my relatives, actually would hand me my post in the morning and go, "Here are your reject letters," because it actually became a joke, right?
I know we're laughing now, but
but honestly, at the time, it was like, oh my gosh, all right, okay, let me just see that they actually spell my name right.
Yes,
they're rejecting me. So I got my letter from Goschalks. I was so thrilled, but also very fearful. I thought, I rang up and I said, can I speak to the training principal? Because I was thinking, oh my gosh, have they made a mistake?
Yes,
have they,
imposter syndrome. I know.
Yes, exactly. Is this for real? But at the same time, you don't want to be speaking to the training principal and sounding doubtful that you've been successful, right? So you have to find the right balance. But he detected it, and he said to me, "You've got to be super proud of yourself. We've had over 300 applicants. We only interview 10 odd, and we only offer a training contract to 3 every year.
Wow.
So you've got to be super proud of yourself. Go and enjoy, go and spend time with your family, go and celebrate with your family. You've done well." And the weight that lifted off my shoulders.
Yes.
And I was so happy, Sally. I actually slept with my letter under my pillow. That's how.
God, I feel like I'm gonna cry.
I fell asleep with it in my hands, woke up in the middle of the night, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna tuck this under my pillow and just wake up and hope it's still there and it's still real. And I've got my training contract. But yeah, I had a great training at Goschalks. It was very, very detailed. I had 2 seats in employment law. My second seat in employment law was a mix of employment and corporate. Sure. And that's where I got an insight to pensions, because I was supporting the M&A, the corporate team, and then obviously embroiled in some M&A activity where they're talking about Section 75 debt. I'd been to some conferences where they touched on, and I learned a little bit, got an insight to the world of pensions, and I found it fascinating, the geek that I am. And so I, at that point in time, was thinking, okay, I really do want to go and trial. I want to go and see if I can be a pensions lawyer. I haven't got the training as a pensions lawyer because it's so niche.
Yeah.
And I think there was a lot of focus on it being within the cities. So anyway, fast forward to qualifying, Goschalks offered me a role in commercial property. But even then I thought, I'm not sure I want to be a commercial property lawyer. Right now it's pensions. That's what's really interesting me. And so I, got in touch with a recruitment agent, and I said, is it possible that without having any kind of training in the world of pensions, that I would be considered for an NQ role? And the agent obviously thought I was a complete nutter because, it's a very niche area of law. Yeah. You're coming from Hull and you want to be a pensions lawyer? Are you kidding me? But anyway, I said, yes. I said, I do. I said, can you just explore what's out there? And I got interviewed by a handful of firms. Of the 2 that had offered me a place, I went with Shoesmiths.
Yeah.
I ended up with Shoesmiths in Milton Keynes. Again, really, really phenomenal team that I worked with there. But then within a year, I was headhunted by Addleshaws.
There you go. There's your magic circle. So hell, onwards and upwards.
Absolutely.
No rejection there, and no imposter syndrome.
That's right. Wow. That's right. So I got headhunted by Addleshaws, and ended up being a member of their foundation team, a pensions team in London.
Yeah.
Again, another really excellent experience, because actually when I joined the team, I joined a team of they were all female partners, right? Very, very powerful, influential, inspirational women. till
Yes.
tomorrow. There was a lot I learned from each of the partners at Adult Shores that I hold to heart. And yeah, so the career progressed from there. I was there shy of 5 years before I made the move in-house to
Wow.
Mercer. So that was a very big leap. Yes, Sally. It was when you're considering well, should I do this? I always saw myself as a general counsel, to be honest.
Did you?
Yes, I always, and I think it might be because of I come from a very my background, my family, very entrepreneurial. My father set up his own company that eventually became listed, and he was always a very entrepreneurial mindset. And I always
Yes.
thought, I'll probably end up being his lawyer, working for his company. I mean, that never happened, but it was just, I always saw myself ending up as a GC, working closer with a business. And
Yes.
so when the opportunity came for me to obviously, step into in-house environment, I was a little I'll say a little skeptical, but I knew that my true passion was to get closer to the business world. And when, it was just a matter of taking that leap of faith. And I have to tell you, I haven't looked back since. It's just been a phenomenal ride, phenomenal journey, a great time at Mercer as well. And now with Cbre.
Yeah. Well, it's a really interesting journey because, of course, there's your branch of the profession, of our profession, the solicitors and private solicitors are losing a lot of excellent counsel. I use the word losing loosely to, businesses having general counsel and in-house counsel. It's very competitive now, and law firms tell me that, we're losing. So I just wondered, what does your average day entail, really? What's the average day for you? Because it just sounds really like glamorous and sexy. Yeah.
Yes. Well, there are some glamorous days, and then there are days where it's just, I feel like I've been dragged through the mud. But the way I describe it is, it's the equivalent of being a GP, right? But for an organization. So you're there to offer preventative care. You're there to offer diagnosis. You're there to offer, whether it's training and education. And then you're there, of course, to treat the ailments,
Yes.
and of course to avoid a reoccurrence. So my role is multifarious. The stuff that crosses my desk is so varied. There's stuff that, yes, requires technical ability, technical knowledge, good knowledge of the law, and there's others that's just general commercial, common sense. That you've got to apply to the challenge. But what makes my role particularly exciting is the fact that, I deal with multiple jurisdictions. I can get through my day and I've spoken to about 10 different countries, right?
Wow.
And I know. I mean, it's just that for me is really what keeps me going. It's that opportunity to be able to connect on that cross-border basis. Sometimes the conversations are very lighthearted. Sometimes they're actually more detailed, and I'm having to, either work with our local council, to deal with the matters, or actually for the countries where we don't have local council, working with the business to appoint local council to deal with the different issues. But, with every matter, you learn something new. You get an insight to the culture, right? Not just the business culture, but the societal expectations. And so it's very exciting. I suppose that's the glam of the role. But as anyone will tell you, there's always good and bad days, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. And interestingly, you still have to use counsel here in England and in all those countries. You're still using law firms or city law firms, which I find quite interesting because actually you're a client and they have to keep looking at their service levels, which is a really exciting part of it. You don't use them all the time, of course, but of course you still use them, which I find fascinating. Let me just move on a bit and talk about the D word. You and I are two black women at different branches of a profession. There are many of us, there are 6 QCs, as we know now from the stats, and I could probably count in my hands and toes the number of black male, let alone female, heads So I wondered, what are you doing at CBRE? I mean, do you care about diversity? Is diversity a passion of yours? But what are you doing at CBRE about it?
Yeah, well, it's an absolute passion of mine. Not just because I am a Black woman with African origins. It is because, I suppose, for me, it's my drive to enter the law was always centered on equity and fairness and justice. And so when I look at the sufferings that a certain demographic endures purely because they look a certain way, they sound a certain way, they come from a certain background.
Yeah.
It really riles me that, anyone would have to, be shortchanged in life because of who they just naturally are.
Yeah.
And so at CBRE, D&I really very much is one of the key driving factors, certainly within our legal operation, but also as a global organization. And I'll share a few things that we do within my immediate team, so within EMEA, and I'll focus first on the UK team. So one of the things that we've done is to revamp our internship program, because I got together with a team of our lead lawyers in the UK, and we said, look, how are we going to be more diverse in our selection of those who intern with us? Because we want to do away with nepotism. Sometimes you get individuals who come in for the work experience and they don't really bother, and it's just, they're just there because their uncle knows someone, and they don't really make that much of an effort. And of course, unfortunately, what that means is that internship, that time that my team have invested in trying to, get them the experience, becomes wasted. It's futile. And because of, I think a number of people in my team know how challenging it is to get even an internship, but particularly with an internship with a global organization like ours. There are people out there who will bite your hand off for the opportunity. Yeah. So we said, right, we're going to scrap all of that. We're going to try the blind CV route. And so actually this year, unfortunately, sadly due to COVID, we weren't able to launch it sooner. But so this year, we're really excited that we've now come up together with support from our talent acquisition team with a selection process whereby we don't get to see your CV. What we do is we advertise the internship to, a handful of universities. We get a whole load of applicants, and then those applicants all get a standard set of questions, right? Everyone gets the same questions. And then what we have is to have, I suppose, a grading process where, members of our legal team will review the responses that are submitted and allocate a grade, right? Yeah. Based on some set questions, right? Yes. And how we feel that the person has responded in response to that. But particularly the focus is around, can this be a mutually beneficial time that we're both spending, you coming into the organization and us obviously investing time in giving you the experience. Yeah. And so, completely anonymized at this stage, obviously those who then become successful, who are the higher scorers, are then interviewed. And from the people that we interviewed, we select 2 individuals who come to intern with us. And it's only at that stage that we even bother with, or that we intend to even perhaps at that stage then ask for the CV, so you can see what universities they're coming from. But we just wanted to make it an even playing field, right? And so that's one of the key initiatives that we've taken up within certainly the UK legal team. And depending on how that pans out, the idea is to look into ways in which we can roll it out across the EMEA region. And another thing that we've done in the UK, and this I've done in partnership with my colleagues so CBRE has got 3 operations. You've got the advisory, you've got GWS, and you've got investment management. And so a couple of years back, I set up our UK legal D&I task force. And the objective of that was, there's a lot of strength in numbers, right? So if we all get together, I mean, we're all CBRE anyway. Yeah. But if we all come together and you're all obviously passionate about changing the D&I landscape within the legal industry, so let's all just powerhouse, all working together towards this goal. And so we're exploring, what can we do to really draw emphasis to our passion towards D&I, and also the expectations that we have of our vendors. And that led us to, and I've done some work with Interlaw Diversity. I sit on the Apollo Leadership Institute on the board there with Daniel Winterfeld.
Yeah, former guest.
Yeah. I mean, he's just really is phenomenal. And so, he'd spoken to me about the Model Diversity Survey, and I just thought, well, absolute no-brainer. I mean, this is a survey that's rolled out, again, that element of uniformity. Everyone's getting the same sort of questions, and we're collecting data. And the reason we're collecting that data is because the intention is to utilize that data to have informed conversations about DE&I. Because we've been talking about changing the landscape for a long, long time, Sally. And everyone, I mean, I don't know one single law firm out there that would say they're not passionate about DE&I. Well, okay, great. Let's see how that translates to not just the intake, the graduate level, but actually right through your organization to partner, to equity partner, etc. And so that was one of the Model Diversity Survey was the one area that as a cohort we felt really passionate about. And in fact, our colleagues in the US had also already signed up to it, and they had obviously their own suite of firms who had also signed up and were obviously sharing their data. And I think this helps to get away from, Sally, the that piece of you get all these beautiful brochures from law firms that tell you all about the DE&I initiatives that they're engaged with and how they're making a difference, etc. But you read through all these very beautiful things, and then you get to a point where you're like, okay, but so what? How does that really translate to the numbers and to retention, etc. And of course, we've got to ensure that we are being clear about what our expectations are. So when I speak to our vendors, I say, look, I want to see a diverse team working on this project. And I don't just want it to be from inception. I want to see that right through to fruition. It's a diverse team that's supporting us. That's a message that it resonates right across our legal operations. Larry Midler, who's our general counsel, who sits at the helm, is very, very passionate about DE&I, and it's not he's not all just about the talk. He means business, right? And you can see it. You can see it within his organization. You can see it within the team, the very diverse range of individuals who are leaders within his org. And then as a business, we have. Certainly the UK business has been doing very much. I'm going to focus on the UK because, of course, I'm based in the UK, but there are lots of initiatives that are rolled out globally. But, in the UK, we've partnered with Career Ready. I don't know if you know about them, but they basically are, they're an operation that supports young individuals with career placements. And basically it's, offering things like mentoring, masterclasses, workshops. And I believe that we're going to have, I think we already had our first intake of placements from Career Ready. And within our organization itself, we've got 6 diversity networks. We've got an ability network. We've got the reach network, which is race, ethnicity. And we've got the faith network, women's network, family network. We've got the proud network. And this is just, these are groups, subgroups within our organization that really spearhead and drive that message. There's so many different pillars of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Absolutely. That, as an operation, we want to make sure that we're covering every ground that we possibly can. One other thing that I just share really quickly that we're doing within the legal team is to create, the safe space to have conversations around D&I. So and this is launched in the US. We've got the diversity dialogues. And basically we set up a Zoom call, we have a subject matter, and, we maybe kick off with a little clip, or, it might be a little snip of a video or a statement to prompt conversation. And that's been very engaging. It's interesting to hear people's thoughts. Of course, you've got then the diversity of thought, but always it's not a must attend. It's a platform for those who are happy to come and engage in those conversations. And we found it really, really fruitful. Really? That we're actually looking to roll it out across EMEA as well.
Which is fantastic. I mean, at the heart of a lot of these, because my other passion is allies. You seem,
Yes.
you mentioned several people who are driving this at the helm of it. In addition to, but we can't drive anything, can we, without allies? And it sounds like, I don't like this term, and I don't use it. The pale, stale male. I don't use it. I prefer to use the term wham, which isn't my phrase. I've stolen it from Brie Hall Stevens, which is a white, heterosexual, able-bodied male. And that's much better than isolating people. We all know why people use that phrasing, and I don't know where it originated from. But I want the wham to be my ally. I
Yeah.
want the men to say, let's have diverse teams. Let's have diverse workforces. Not just the men, everybody else with a protected characteristic. So it's wonderful to know that actually you've got great allies also who are there driving this. But it leads me to ask you this, though, Banke. What's the difference between the US and the UK on diversity, particularly in GCs? Is it just the volume? Because they seem to be way ahead of us in what they do.
Yeah, I mean, Sally, it's a difficult question. And when I've had conversations around it, some of the feedback that I've had is, well, it's the lack of critical mass.
Yes.
In the US, they've got more Black GCs, or
Yeah,
they've got
and they're
more
visible.
diverse GCs. They're very visible. But I don't know. See, the thing is, what I struggle with is, Sally, like you mentioned at the start of this call, whether people are willing to engage with diversity, equity, and inclusion matters, being a diverse person themselves.
Yes.
And I don't know if the problem that we have is that perhaps there's more of those individuals who are quite senior in organizations, but there's something that just makes them reluctant to fly the flag, in the same way that you and I are more than happy to be front runners and to fly the flag and to say, look, if this helps, if somebody out there needs to see a role model, and can see that, it's actually possible for you to be, from a certain demographic, but still be successful if you're resilient, and you really are passionate about, your aspirations and your goals. And I suppose, when I've thought about it, I've wondered, even for those who might not want to engage and who just want to sit quietly or just fade into the background, then I ask the question, well, why? What is it that makes you so uncomfortable to not want to be visible and to be vocal about increasing representation that looks like you, right, within organizations? And, I have to be honest, the mind boggles. I think there's been enough of a movement now. I think there is more of a movement now, Sally, that we might get more people just coming out of that shell and really doing more to be visible. But I really am stumped on that question. I do feel, though, that something more needs to be done. There's more needs to be done to encourage those of us, because I'm sure, Sally, I mean, you've interviewed a ton of people.
Yeah.
And I mean, these are all individuals who are willing to be visible, hence being on your podcast. But I suppose the question is, how do we reach out to those who we know are there, but aren't being visible? What is it that we can, I suppose it's maybe a question for the organizations themselves. I mean, if you've got someone who, and honestly, should be flying the flag, ask yourself, why? What is it that makes them feel uncomfortable, that, makes them unwilling to be that visible and that present? But also at the same time, we've got to just respect individuals.
Okay? Oh, totally.
Everyone is entitled to not, no, just because you're Black doesn't mean you have to engage, right? Just because you're a woman doesn't mean you have to engage.
Absolutely.
It's everyone is entitled to their own views and to their own opinions. And I suppose that's one thing that we've got to respect. I mentioned respect earlier, so we've got to respect that too.
Absolutely. I mean, I suppose my only point is, look, McKinsey has published so many reports on, more diverse organizations being more profitable, if anything, that I'm always very keen when we talk about diversity, never mind the moral argument, how I would have thought organizations want to make more money. So I'm always just very interested and very keen, but I fully respect and that there is a bit of a pressure and there is a bit of a labeling, if you're talking about the gender pay gap, or, you're talking about LGBTQ plus issues, that, you get labeled a bit, and maybe that can make people feel as though I don't actually want to speak about the issue. But I think we owe it to our children, don't we, to be positive role models,
absolutely,
wherever we can. Well, Banke, everyone, I'm sure, apart from me, are kind of desperate to work a CBRE now. We're hearing all yeah, I'm like, yeah, can you get me a job somewhere too? So we all want to work there. But what I want to ask you is about what you do for your well-being. You've got a big job. You've got 2 children. You don't drink tea or coffee. So how you're getting through the day, I do not know. But I'm wondering what you do. We're in a job with long hours, and burnout is high. Let's be truthful about it. And I really care about our well-being, how we can all be better. So I just wonder, what do you do, or what would you like to do for your own well-being?
Well, Sally, I know that you love gardening, because I've heard that you love gardening. Well, let me tell you this. Gardening is not for me. It is not for me. I tried my hand at gardening during lockdown, and I've got to share this experience with you. So, we planted some tulip bulbs, and I thought, okay, I can't wait for, nature to take its course. And nature did take its course, but in a very different way. So we got a deer who came round to our garden and dug up my garden, ate up a good number of bulbs, and then came back the next day with his friends, and they obliterated my garden, right? So I'm sitting, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, well, no, I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to give up. Okay, no bulbs. I'm going to go out to the garden center. I'm going to pick up some dahlias, some hydrangeas, and I forget what the name of the plant was, but it was a cone-shaped, very pretty looking plant. And I planted them. I was out in the garden with my kids, and I was thinking, yes, well-being. This is good. Gardening is a bit. Got myself some plant food and sprinkled. Anyway, a couple of days later, I look out the window, and I'm looking at plants that look like a skeletal version of what I purchased. And I'm thinking, what is going on here? I step outside, and it's slugs. Okay. Oh my gosh. I thought, this is not for me. Gardening is an overrated experience. So I take my hat off to anyone who's got the patience for it. But I failed. I failed woefully. I mean, I've got potted plants. They'll do their inside. That works. That's about it for me. But in terms of well-being, Sally, I have always been very passionate about history and literature and the arts. Yeah. So when I do have the time, I would go to theatre. I love the theatre. And I love music, so musical theatre, even better. Yes, but also, if I don't get that chance, and of course, we've had lockdown, it's only just now that the theatres are reopening, I would sit and watch a period drama, the likes of The Crown, Turn, Medici, all those sort of shows. I would sit down if I got a bit of downtime, I'd sit down and I'd watch that. And apart from that, it's I've got a bit of a shoeaholic, Sally. So to my husband's dismay. Yes. Oh well, we all need something. I'm with you. Something. You sound like my sister. It's the shoes. I do like, when I feel like I've deserved to treat myself to a pair of shoes. I do love to treat myself. Yeah, to a nice pair of shoes. I feel like we need to get, some Jimmy Choo's in-house counsel or, absolutely shit or something, so we can get some treats of what's coming up. But you mentioned literature, and I wondered, we have a book club at Women in the Law, so we're always looking for books. But I wondered if you have a favorite book and why that you'd like to share. And if you haven't, I want to ask you about a favorite legal character, maybe. Perhaps it is a costume drama character. Yeah, well, the thing is, I would say I used to be an avid reader, but of course, as things have got busier, not just with work, with the kids, I've always found it's a little challenging to find that time to just, zone in, as I used to zone in on a book. So I feel like I cheat sometimes when I do the audio books, but it works, right? Oh, yeah. But it's difficult. It's difficult for me to pick one that I would say is a favorite. I mean, I suppose maybe it's cliche, but I would say that I absolutely loved Michelle Obama's Becoming. That was great. And right now, actually gone on my desk, it's called The Culture Map by Erin Meyer. And this sort of, gives you an insight to, the different cultures and, just, what to keep in mind when managing transactions on a cross-border basis and dealing with all these different cultures. But I have to tell you that maybe if I think back, the one book that really it was so gripping that every time I think of the book, I shudder. It was A Thousand Splendid Suns.
Oh, I love that book.
Oh my goodness, by Khaled Hosseini. I hope I've said his name right. And it's just, it was, when you think about the two female characters in that book and think about the times that we're in right now, with the war, obviously in Ukraine, but obviously the situation in Afghanistan, but all just the resilience of those two women and the fact that they got together, they eventually helped each other out. And it was that there was so much power in their standing united to support each other through the adversity that they were unfortunately enduring.
Yes.
Because of their status as women. And it was one of those books that it was such a roller coaster. Oh my goodness. And, towards the end of it, I don't want any spoilers, but it was do you remember the bit in the book about the Pinocchio, where she was supposed to have been taken to watch Pinocchio? Her father was supposed to take her to watch Pinocchio.
Yes.
And then he ended up putting, a recording of it in the box, but obviously, sadly, she had died. But anyway, look, whilst it's fictional, it's so easy for you to imagine the reality, given what's going on in the world, what's going on in Afghanistan, what's going on in Ukraine and other places where, there's just so much that's happening that really isn't necessary.
Yeah, no, I know. It is it's a long time since I read that book. I think it's worthy of a reread. A lighter question, which was the one I was asking you about, a legal character. Are you an Ally McBeal or a Jessica Fletcher? There are loads of legal characters. I don't know why I often give that as an example, example of the Old Bailey. But have you got a favourite fictional legal character?
Well, Sally, I know you interviewed Martin Shaw.
Oh,
and I loved him as Judge John Deed. He was brilliant. He was so good. He was amazing. But I'm going to tell you, Sally, it's difficult to give you one. I will have to give you the entire law firm of Cage. I think, was it Cage and Fish? Ally McBeal.
Oh, I can't remember that sort of
I think it was
detail.
Cage and Fish. But the reason I've gone for Ally McBeal is because, sometimes you just need a good laugh.
Yeah.
And that firm was just a firm full of absolute characters. And I remember just watching religiously watching episode after episode and just laughing my head off, but also just being fascinated about, even more so about the law and the powerful women within the show. It would have to be Cage and Fish.
Oh, well, I need to watch those again, actually, or hope to meet some of the Ally McBeals when I go to State in September.
Yes.
It'll be really cool. Banke, a more serious question, if I may. What advice would you give to people entering the law now, whether it's applications or skills that they require? Because, getting in the profession is just as tough as progressing in it often. And I'm concerned, actually, that the side effects of COVID is that there's going to be less opportunities, quite frankly. So the competition's maybe going to be stiffer, and certainly stiffer for those who are coming from diverse backgrounds, whether it's underrepresented groups or socially different groups or whatever it may be. But that aside, what advice would you have for perhaps young people entering the profession?
Well, I would say, I suppose this is something most likely they would have heard anyway, is to work hard. But I would say it's not just working hard at the academic, technical, area of law, but it's also working hard at the human-centered skills. Okay, so, from my perspective, and certainly from my experience, to be a successful lawyer, to have a good balance of both that sort of emotional intelligence and technical ability. I think there's always been so much focus on just the academic side of the academia, but I do feel certainly within the in-house environment that lawyers have got to be able to adopt even more so now the human-centered, being able to empathize, being able to think laterally, and being able to connect with key stakeholders. So, don't belittle that as part of your training. The other piece of advice I'd give is, of course, you've got to just be authentic, right? Be yourself. And I suppose I'd also say, Jane, don't pigeonhole yourself and don't allow yourself to be pigeonholed. Be fluid, okay? So I've just shared with you my journey. I started out, I was offered a role in commercial property. I wanted to do pensions. I did pensions, and now I'm doing, corporate commercial law and enjoying it, right? So have an open mind. Have an open mind as to where the law might take you, because there's just so many limbs to the law. You just never know where, you might be home for now, but there might be another home that's even better and even more comfortable for you. So also just be versatile, I would say, and be resilient. Don't give up.
Yeah.
I mean, I was not ready to give up on the law. I was so passionate, I wanted to do it. And another thing that I didn't wait for was I didn't wait to see a role model. I wanted to be that role model, right? So just that element of be what you want to see, okay? And it's having that confidence and that trust in yourself that you will land on your feet, right? So be happy to be the first, right? Be happy to be the first. And of course, when you eventually get there, make sure you take time to pay it forward, okay? And support others who might be just at the start of that journey. And I'll wrap it up by saying, just act with integrity, because you just don't want to find yourself in a situation where dirt is uncovered, or, you've worked so hard and it's all dismissed because you've done something really silly and just, just not aligned with the standards to which we really all should uphold ourselves. So always act with integrity.
Yes, that is fantastic advice. Well, given that that's entering the profession then, Banke, what about progress in law? The attrition rates are still not brilliant. I mentioned before about people going to be GCs. Actually, that's a very successful career path. But still, there aren't still that many women leaders, whether it's in business or indeed in the law, whether it's judges. The numbers are getting better, and the JSE are doing brilliant work to increase that. But even as managing partners in the private sector, I just wonder if you got any advice about how to progress, in the law. A bit of advice perhaps for women who have been in the job for a good while and wondering, how do I progress, whether they're in the private sector or as in the business sector as general counsel or in-house counsel.
Yeah. I mean, certainly a lot of what I've already said, I would say, applies here as well. The resilience element, the sort of obviously being an all-rounder, okay, so adopting and really investing time in building your interpersonal skills as well as your technical capabilities. But I think we've got to a stage now where I feel, women are, always told, you go and do this, go and do that, and then you can be more successful. That I actually, my view is we need to flip things on their head and actually ask the organizations that women are working within, what are you doing to make this environment, make this organization more palatable for women and women's growth and success? And so to that, I'd be saying to the women who are in those organizations who are thinking, oh gosh, what else do I need to do, is just take a step back and apply a forensic analysis to what it is your organization needs to be doing better to promote and support women, and then be vocal about it, right? Don't wait for somebody else to fix the situation for you. If you're sitting there wondering, how can I progress, and feeling that there are obstacles to your being able to progress, just take a step back and think about, well, what ways can I surmount these obstacles, and how can I vocalize the issues to my organization? How can I be that person who brings the change to the organization? I think we need more of that than the, women, you've got to go and do this, you've got to do that, you've got to, think about work-life balance. Honestly, reality is work-life balance is different for everyone. Okay, everyone's got their own definition of balance. Okay, and just as everyone's got their own definition of well-being, right? What does it mean? What makes you feel comfortable, etc. So, I certainly would say, don't hesitate to look out and speak up, right, where you feel that there might be flaws within your own organization. But also, I think what we need is to have women really supporting women, right? Because women who are in leadership positions, I think it really is incumbent on them to look out for and to help promote women who are, more junior or further down the ranks, because we just know how challenging it is for them to get a seat at the table. So if you've got a seat at the table, I certainly think that you've got to, it really is become a duty that you create that seat at the table, that you advocate for women who are performing, because of course it's got to be meritorious. You're not just going to throw any woman into a boardroom, but it's being able to advocate for those who have and show potential to succeed at that table. And I'd don't wait for a title to be a leader, okay? Because every one of us has got leadership qualities. Everyone has got leadership skills. I've heard people say things like, "Oh my goodness, that's above my pay grade." And immediately I think, well, you're never going to get to that pay grade if you're thinking like that. You've got to have that mindset of already wearing that badge or already holding that title that you aspire to receive, and actually just leading by example. So that pretty much is in a nutshell is what I would advise women progressing in the law. And just don't give up. Yes, we still got a lot of challenges. Yes, there's the glass ceiling. We see it in so many different places, but also we've seen that glass ceiling smashed. So you just keep at it.
Absolutely. Do you know, I love that. I'm like busy scribbling down. So, and I've got a scratchy fountain pen. I especially like this. Don't wait for a title to be a leader. Because, the Bar Council held an inaugural leadership kind of mentoring course last year. And I was asked to be one of the mentors, and I did take it up eventually. But I was like, but I'm not a leader. And the reason was that everybody else was a silk, a QC, who were mentoring. And the woman who set it up, which was Brie Hall-Stevens, and the Amanda Pinto, who was the chair of the Bar Council at the time, was saying, well, you are a leader.
Yes.
And I thought, crikey. And so I love that. Don't wait for a title to be a leader, amongst all that brilliant advice. Now, Banke, just as we're getting close to the end, I want to ask you this. I know that you wanted to be a judge when you were. Yeah, I know. I did my homework. Yeah. I'm good with research, preparation. I always say that when I teach advocacy. Preparation. So I know that was one of the passions that you had, and I'm a big advocate in getting people to think about applying to the judiciary, and I applaud everything that, as I say, the JAC have been doing to make that happen. And so I wondered if, really, the question is, what's next? Is still being a judge on the cards, because of
interesting.
Course,
You've been doing your research.
Yeah, of course I have.
Well,
what's next?
Well, being a judge, I'd share. Obviously, this is from childhood. In fact, I got a nickname, the shortest judge, and you might hear some of my friends calling me SJ.
I love
that because I had. I was always sort of, rooting for justice. So that's how I got the nickname. I don't know that I'm still targeting, ultimately being a judge. I think in terms of what next, as I said, I feel like I'm still at the start of my journey. So it's doing more of what I'm doing now and doing it better. I am looking at ways in which I can be even more visible and, really drive forward D&I initiatives. You never know. I might end up in a global role. You never know. I might end up with a book. I don't know. I might have to come and get some tips from you, Sally. You've written so many books.
I'm there. Just do it. I'll read it. You've given so much great advice. I want to see that book coming out.
So you just, you've got to watch this space.
Well, interestingly, then, you say watch this space, but what would you like to see in the GC space? What would be exciting to see here in England for us to be doing? Because I think it's a really growing sector. And do you think we can have a mass of more diverse people?
Yeah. Sally, I think we already touched on it, and it's just seeing more of that diverse representation within the GC space, and actually more collaboration. I want to see more law firms, get over the fear of criticism, and just be more collaborative, right?
Yeah.
In, sharing data, in working with their clients to really change the dynamics for our industry. So it's more diversity, it's more allies. I can't advocate for allies enough. I mean, certainly in my career journey, I had many allies. I still have them now. And they really are the ones who speak for you in the rooms that you don't get that presence to. So it's asking and waving that flag for more allies who are committed, really, really committed to driving forward DE&I in our industry. So that's how I'd like to see things change, for my kids, when they're old enough to look into the legal world, that they don't see it as being too much in favor of one certain demographic, but that things are a little more evened out. I know that is, very, very wishful, but it's a wish. And I still, would do everything I can. However little the ripple, it's still a ripple. And it's working towards that ultimate goal.
Absolutely. Well, you mentioned your kids,
Yes.
and I know that there was an incident at school.
Oh, yes.
With your daughter, Kate. Can you just share that with me? Because I love the way you dealt with this,
Yeah.
and the rainbow. And we all have these incidents. Certainly, I have had. I'm sure many people else have had it in one shape or another. Working mums. Can you just share that? What happened?
Absolutely.
And that brilliant way that you used the rainbow to deal with it.
So just to set the scene, I live in a village. It's there's not very many minority ethnics in the village, particularly at the time when we first started living in the village.
Yes.
And so this was a few years back, say 6-7 years back. My daughter was 5. She was attending school. She was one of 2 minority ethnics in the school, and she said she came home after school one day and she was telling me about her day, and she said she was in the playground and this one girl was talking about her birthday party. And she turned around to my daughter and she said, well, you're not invited to my birthday party because no brown people are allowed. And of course, my daughter, when she said that to me, I mean, my immediate reaction was, what? Did she really say that? Because of course, speaking to a 5-year-old, I'm thinking, did she really say that? Come on. And she was like, yes, Mom. And she said, I'm not allowed to her party because no brown people are allowed. I said, are you sure she said that? She says, yes. She said, yeah. And she looked at me. I'll never forget the sort of the look on her face because, my family is very diverse. I never thought to have a conversation with her about race and about the color of her skin. And I had to stop myself, Sally. I've used this phrase before. I'll use it again. I had to stop myself from turning into the Hulk because I thought she's watching me. And when you get that moment when kids are just studying you, right?
Yeah.
And she was watching me and she was watching for my reaction. I don't know where this came from, but I just turned down. I said, well, look, I said, Farah, I said, why is a rainbow so beautiful? And she immediately perks up and she's like, oh, because it's got lots and lots of colors in it. And I was like, exactly. I said, a rainbow is beautiful because it's got lots and lots of colors in it. I said, can you imagine if a rainbow was just one color? And she was like, oh, it would be so boring. I was like, exactly. I said, the rainbow, I said, it would be so boring. You wouldn't stop and stare at it. You wouldn't wow at it. And I said, the world, I said, is a very beautiful place because, there's so many different people of different colors, different color eyes, different color hair, different color skin in it. And unfortunately, not everyone can see the beauty of the world because of the mix and the different colors in the world. And of course, she's like instantly, she's perked up and she's like, because of course we're talking about something colorful. She brightens up and she's like straight on to planning her own birthday party. And she was like, Mommy, we are going to invite all of the colors of the world to my birthday party. And Mommy, we must invite the Ninja Turtles because, they're green. I was like, of course, we're going to invite the Ninja Turtles to your birthday party. No problem at all. Now, obviously I had that conversation with her and I taught her about the diversity of the world. And then, separately went to the school and I was like, hey, this has happened. Okay, I'm not going to give you a name, but you need to do something about this. And I was very impressed by the school's response, actually, because, almost instantly, she was coming back home and she was talking about, oh, we had this diversity day, and we did this, and it's about respect, and it's this and that. And I thought, good. I mean, I ended up actually on the diversity committee of the school, which was, I was like, I want to make sure you guys are doing the stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Okay? Exactly. Yeah.
Come to me for ideas. I'm willing to share. But then I've got to share this, Sally, that I also learned from her, because a couple of weeks later, I took her to Toys R Us when Toys R Us still had shops. And, we had a star chart at home where she would get a star for, she's made her bed,
I remember
etc. So if she's been good, we go to the shops and we'll buy her a present. And so we're at Toys R Us and she turns around to me and she says, she'd like to get this girl a birthday present. And I was like, no, what are you doing buying her a present? And she insisted, she's like, no, mommy, I want to buy her a present. I say, no. I'm not buying her a present. She was horrible to you, so you're not buying her a present. And she was just like, no, I want to buy her a present. I said, why do you want to buy her a present? Because in my head, I'm thinking, is this child trying to bribe her way into the party? Because if she is, I have failed as a parent. Anyway, she insists and she's like, I want to buy a present, mommy. And I said, why do you want to buy her a present? She says, because it's kind. And I said, okay, well, who am I to stand in the way of kindness? Go ahead, go and pick a present for her. And she marches over to the Barbie doll aisle, as she often did. And she picks out a black Barbie. Okay. Wow. And I'm like, why have you picked this toy? And she said, because I want her to know that it's okay to play with someone who looks like me. And in that instant, I thought, well, hey, you know what? I've just learned from her that you never stop trying to edify, to enlighten, and to show, just help people understand.
Yes.
That to see and to embrace diversity and the positivities that come with diversities. I actually learned from her at that stage because, of course, as humans and as we grow up, we become a little hardened and, you forget about, the innocence of a child. She was just wanting to buy a present for her. And she'd obviously gone past not being invited. She'd forgiven her. I mean, that present probably ended up in the bin, right? But
it doesn't matter.
It was exactly. It doesn't matter. It was a lesson for me, and will always stay with me. That whatever the obstacle, you don't stop.
Yeah, I mean, wow. That's really, just to take a moment to reflect on that is so powerful. And, you going on that committee even, we can have diversity, but it needs to be inclusive. And that's what inclusion and equity is, isn't it? So I really love that. I suppose a final question, if I may, Banke, is this, that you seem really confident to me. Like you've already, even with your 1,000,001 rejection letters before you went to your fancy law firm. And maybe, sometimes confidence comes in different ways, right? Doesn't it? Or appears in different ways. But just before we started this podcast, you were like, oh my God, my imposter syndrome is going through the roof here. And I'm thinking, you're talking to, a barely 5 foot short black woman here who's had a long...
here.
Yeah, see, there we are. I'm not sure what's imposter syndrome is there, but I wondered, because I often say everyone suffers from imposter syndrome, men, anybody of different sizes and shape, whatever. And it's just that we women, maybe we talk about it a little bit more. But I just wanted to ask you, do you get imposter syndrome and how do you cope with it? Because I get imposter syndrome all the time.
Yeah.
And it's how we deal with it, because occasionally it can act as a catalyst, can't it?
Yes.
And maybe that's why I think, oh, you're confident all the time. Of course, nobody can be confident all the time. It's ridiculous. And maybe there are some people, and if you're one of those people who's confident all the time, good for you. Share it with the rest of us. But how do you deal with your imposter syndrome when it comes?
Well, it just is. It's always there, but I notice it's there when I'm doing something challenging and something new. And so that's where I get the comfort to tell my imposter syndrome. I know before we started the call, I'd said, my imposter syndrome is on stage. It's dancing with maracas, going, what the hell are you doing? But it's and of course, I think I shared with you, Sally, when I got the invite to be on your podcast, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. She's emailed the wrong person, right? This is Sally Penni we're talking about here. But
no error. I see your work. I see what you're doing, and that's what I said to you. Nope, you're the right person.
But it's basically getting to a point where you realize that the reason you have the nerves and the anxiety is because you're doing something new, you're doing something that is challenging and stretching, and just taking comfort in the fact that, right, okay, yes, there's two ways this could go. You could succeed at it or you could fail. But if you fail, you can always pick yourself up and fix it and learn and just take the lessons. The success is all about how you overcome failure, right? So it's taking stock and getting to that point where I'm like, okay, I hear you. I see you doing your dance, but it's okay. This is something new. This is something challenging, and we'll be okay. We'll be okay.
Yeah. Wow. Well, Banke, I started this podcast because I wanted to showcase leaders in law. I wanted to hear voices and role models, certainly, that I didn't see nor hear. And I wanted to share that with the thousands who listen to this podcast. And you've certainly done that. It's been wonderful hearing your journey, what you're doing at Cbre, and I can't wait to hear and see what the future holds in respect of your career. Thank you so much, Banke.
Thank you, Sally. It's been a pleasure.
A big thank you to Banke Odunaike for talking law with me, Sally Penni. And thanks again to Cbre for supporting this episode. Do visit cbre.com to find out more about the work they do across the world. If you'd like to support Talking Law, then please get in touch. You can find me and follow me on Twitter at SallyPenny1 or search for Sally Penni on LinkedIn or Instagram. Do make sure you catch up with previous episodes of Talking Law, where you can hear my interviews with guests such as experienced litigator Harold Braco from Adelshaw Goddard LLP and QC Cherie Blair. Before I go, a reminder about the annual dinner. And do watch my TED Talk at TED.com. Thank you to our production team, Sam Walker, Michael Blades at What Goes On Media. I'm Sally Penni MBE. Bye for now.